The muted media landscape often leaves us questioning. Why is there such silence on Israel's actions? International media outlets, they often seem hesitant to criticize the Israeli government. This reluctance, well, it's a complex issue. It stems from a variety of interconnected factors, and these factors, they shape the information that reaches the global public. Understanding these dynamics, it's crucial as it helps explain the perceived silence surrounding actions in Palestine. Many observers, they point to political pressures influencing newsrooms, while others highlight the powerful narratives that frame the conflict. The result, often a media landscape that avoids deep scrutiny of certain state actions. This avoidance, it has profound consequences for public understanding and international policy. One significant reason for this muted coverage is the Israeli government's sophisticated public relations efforts. These efforts, they actively work to shape international perceptions, promoting a specific narrative of the conflict. This narrative, it often emphasizes security concerns above all else. Journalists who deviate from this preferred storyline, well, they can face accusations. They might be labeled as biased or even anti-Semitic. Such accusations, they can have a chilling effect on reporting, leading many outlets to tread carefully. They may opt for more neutral language, even when events on the ground are far from neutral. This careful treading, it can obscure the reality for many. Furthermore, geopolitical alliances, they play a substantial role. Key Western governments often provide strong diplomatic support for Israel, and this support can translate into media environments less critical of Israeli policies. News organizations, they may be wary of contradicting their own government's official stances. This is particularly true for state-funded broadcasters or media with strong national allegiances. The fear of diplomatic repercussions or loss of access, it can subtly influence editorial decisions. The powerful backing from major global players provides a shield, deflecting much of the criticism that might otherwise arise from international reporting. The internal dynamics within media organizations, they also contribute to this phenomenon. Ownership structures can influence editorial lines. Some media proprietors, they may have business or political interests aligned with maintaining a less critical stance. Additionally, the very real dangers faced by journalists reporting from the region, they cannot be understated. Access to areas like Gaza is often restricted. Reporting critically can lead to denial of visas or press credentials. These pressures, both overt and subtle, they combine to create an environment where comprehensive and critical reporting on Israeli government actions is often stifled. This systemic issue, it needs urgent addressing. The rhetoric emanating from Israeli government officials, it's becoming increasingly alarming. Such language, often it goes underreported or is downplayed by mainstream international media. These statements, well, they're not isolated incidents. They form part of a pattern of dehumanizing language directed towards Palestinians. This rhetoric, it often lays the groundwork for aggressive policies and actions. It is crucial to examine these statements closely as they provide insight into the intentions and motivations behind state actions. Ignoring such official discourse means missing a critical piece of the puzzle. It allows extreme views to normalize Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich. He's been particularly prominent in making inflammatory statements. In May 2025, Smotrich declared that Gaza would cease to exist within 6 months, stating that the surviving population would be herded into a humanitarian zone. More recently, on June 5, 2025, he reiterated this stance, saying Israel plans to totally destroy Gaza within a few months. He detailed a plan where Gazan citizens would be concentrated in the south, predicting they would become so despairing they would seek relocation. He also foresaw Hamas ceasing to exist and the rest of Gaza emptied. These are not ambiguous remarks. Other Israeli officials have echoed similar sentiments. Since October 7, 2023, there has been open incitement for the destruction of Gaza, with calls for the destruction of its Palestinian inhabitants being heard. MK Nissim Vaturi, Deputy Speaker of Israel's parliament, stated the goal of erasing the Gaza Strip from the face of the earth. Such genocidal rhetoric, as described by Plus 972 magazine, is reportedly pouring out of the Knesset. The Israeli establishment, it has gradually absorbed members of what was formerly considered a terrorist group. This rhetoric, it mirrors the devastation witnessed in Gaza. Some analyses suggest Israel is no longer hiding its genocidal aims. These statements, they're not mere political posturing. They have real-world implications. They contribute to an environment where extreme violence can be seen as acceptable. Legal experts, they've pointed to this rhetoric as potential evidence of intent in international courts. For example, over 800 lawyers cited Smotrich's statement about the IDF wiping out Palestinian Gaza. They presented this in a letter to UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer as an indication of genocidal intent. The failure of much of the international media to consistently highlight and condemn such language, it's a serious concern. It contributes to the broader silence discussed. A tale of two narratives unfolds when we look at double standards in global media coverage. The concept of double standards, it's central to understanding international media coverage of Israel and Palestine. Many analysts and observers, they point to a clear discrepancy. This discrepancy is seen in how acts of violence and human rights violations are reported depending on who the perpetrators and victims are. When state actors like Israel are involved, the language used is often more cautious, frequently couched in terms of security and self-defense. This contrasts sharply with coverage of non-state actors or disfavored states, whose actions are often quickly labeled as terrorism or aggression without similar contextualization. This disparity, it's not accidental. This selective framing, it has tangible effects on public perception. It shapes how audiences around the world understand the conflict. If one side's actions are consistently presented as reactive or defensive, it becomes difficult to see them as an aggressor. Conversely, if another side's actions are constantly highlighted as unprovoked, a different picture emerges. This imbalance means that the root causes of the conflict are often obscured. The historical context of occupation and dispossession is frequently minimized, with the focus remaining on immediate events. This focus, it often favors the narrative of the more powerful party involved in the conflict. Consider the language used to describe casualties. When Israelis are killed, media reports often provide personal details humanizing the victims. When Palestinians are killed, they are frequently reported as numbers and their individual stories are less commonly told. This differential reporting creates an empathy gap, making it harder for international audiences to connect with Palestinian suffering. Similarly, protests by Palestinians are often framed as riots or disturbances, while similar protests elsewhere might be lauded as democratic expressions. These subtle yet persistent double standards, they reinforce a skewed understanding of the situation. The reasons for these double standards, they're multifaceted. They include political alignments, economic pressures, and cultural biases. The influence of powerful lobby groups, it cannot be ignored. These groups actively work to shape media narratives, often pressuring outlets to adopt language favorable to Israeli government positions. Furthermore, the very structure of international news gathering, it can contribute. Access to Israeli officials is often easier than access to those in besieged Gaza. This imbalance in access can lead to an imbalance in reporting. Addressing these double standards requires a conscious effort from journalists and media organizations. They must strive for more equitable and context-rich coverage. Beacons of dissent shine through as some media outlets challenge the dominant narrative. Despite the prevailing tendencies in mainstream media, some outlets, they consistently provide critical coverage. These organizations, they offer alternative perspectives on Israeli government actions, challenging the dominant narratives. Plus, 972 magazine, an independent journalism platform from Israel-Palestine, is one such example. It actively reports on and criticizes Israeli government policies covering crucial topics such as genocidal aims, war crimes, settler violence, and the crackdown on dissent within Israel itself. These outlets, they play a vital role in informing the public, providing information often missing from more traditional news sources. Anadolu Agency, a Turkish news agency, also features articles that scrutinize Israeli actions. For instance, it has highlighted voices of resistance. Women journalists challenge media silence, redefine narrative on Palestine. This indicates a conscious effort to counter what many perceive as widespread media silence or bias. These platforms, they often give voice to Palestinian journalists and analysts, ensuring their perspectives are heard on the international stage. This commitment to diverse voices, it's essential for a fuller understanding. It helps to counterbalance narratives that might otherwise dominate the information landscape. These outlets, they often face significant pressure for their work. The work of these critical media outlets, it's indispensable. They provide detailed investigations and on-the-ground reporting, often uncovering stories that larger corporate media might overlook or downplay. For example, Plus 972 magazine has published detailed accounts of Israel's mission of total urban destruction in Gaza. They have documented the systematic campaign to make the strip unlivable using airstrikes, bulldozers and explosives. Such in-depth reporting, it's crucial for accountability. It ensures that a record of events is preserved, even if widespread international action is slow to materialize. These alternative media platforms, they demonstrate that critical journalism is possible. Even in highly contested and sensitive contexts, they often operate with fewer resources than mainstream giants, yet their impact can be substantial. They inform activists, policymakers, and a concerned global public. They also serve as an important archive, documenting human rights abuses and potential war crimes. Supporting such independent journalism, it's crucial. It helps to foster a more informed public discourse and pushes for greater accountability for actions taken by all parties in the conflict. Their courage, it helps to pierce the silence. Section 5. Shaping the story influences on international media reporting. Several complex factors influence how international media covers the actions of the Israeli government. These factors collectively contribute to the often muted criticism. One significant element is direct and indirect censorship. Within Israel itself, there is a perception that the extent of Gaza's hunger plight is skewed. This is due to censorship and media that downplay humanitarian crisis, as noted by TheConversation.com. This internal media environment inevitably impacts the information that flows outwards. International journalists often rely on local sources and reports. If these are constrained, international coverage will also be affected. The internal Israeli narrative also plays a powerful role. This narrative is deeply ingrained in society and promoted by state institutions. It often frames security as the paramount concern. It portrays actions in Gaza and the West Bank as necessary responses to threats. This narrative can be compelling, particularly for audiences unfamiliar with the deeper historical context. International media outlets may inadvertently absorb and reflect this narrative. This happens especially if their reporters are based primarily in Israel or if they rely heavily on official Israeli sources for information. This can lead to reporting that lacks crucial context about the occupation. Sensitivity around accusations of anti-Semitism is another major factor. Criticizing Israeli government policies is a legitimate act. It is distinct from anti-Semitism, which is prejudice against Jewish people. However, these two are often deliberately conflated by some advocates for Israel. This conflation creates a chilling effect. Journalists and media outlets may self-censor. They fear being unfairly labeled as anti-Semitic if they report critically on Israeli actions. This fear is potent. It can lead to overly cautious reporting. It can also lead to the avoidance of stories that might be deemed too controversial. This dynamic significantly curtails open discussion. Moreover, the resources and access available to journalists shape coverage. Reporting from Gaza is extremely difficult and dangerous. Israel controls entry and exit points for foreign journalists. This control can be used to limit access for those deemed too critical. Conversely, access to Israeli officials and spokespeople is generally more straightforward. This imbalance in access can lead to an imbalance in reporting. Stories from the Palestinian perspective may be harder to obtain and verify. This contributes to a media landscape where the Israeli government's narrative often receives more prominent and less critical play. These pressures are systemic. Section 6. The Scales of Justice, International Law and Expert Scrutiny. Despite the muted political response from many governments, international legal bodies have taken significant action. These actions address concerns about Israel's conduct. In December 2023, South Africa compiled a detailed record of Israeli official statements. This record was submitted to the International Court of Justice, or ICJ. South Africa alleged Israel's intent to perpetrate genocide in Gaza. This was a landmark moment. It brought the issue of accountability to the world's highest court. The ICJ is the principal judicial organ of the United Nations. Its rulings carry significant moral and legal weight. Following South Africa's application, the ICJ acted relatively swiftly. In January 2024, the court found that Israel was at risk of perpetrating genocide in Gaza. It ordered several provisional measures. These measures aim to prevent genocidal acts. Later, in July 2024, the ICJ delivered another crucial ruling. It found that Israel's ongoing occupation of Palestinian territories was illegal under international law. The court stated that this occupation must end. These ICJ rulings represent a strong condemnation from the international legal system. They provide a legal framework for understanding the situation. The International Criminal Court, or ICC, has also become involved. In November 2024, the ICC prosecutor announced a significant step. Arrest warrants were sought and subsequently issued for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Warrants were also issued for former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. The charges related to alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity committed in Gaza. This move by the ICC signals that individuals in high office can be held accountable. It underscores the gravity of the allegations. Josep Borrell, the former EU foreign policy chief, has described statements by Israeli officials as clear declarations of genocidal intent. Numerous legal experts and human rights organizations have echoed these concerns. Professor Guy Goodwin Gill, an expert in international humanitarian law, confirmed that war crimes have likely been committed. He suggested that genocidal intent could be inferred from political statements made by Israeli leaders. He noted that individual prosecutions for both war crimes and genocide are possible. In May 2025, The Guardian reported that 380 writers and groups signed an open letter. This letter called Israel's military actions in Gaza genocide. Over 800 lawyers, including former UK Supreme Court justices, also urged sanctions on Israel. They cited mounting evidence of genocide in a letter to the UK Prime Minister. Section 7. Gaza's agony. The human cost of conflict and blockade. The humanitarian impact of Israel's actions in Gaza has been catastrophic. The scale of death and destruction is difficult to comprehend. Residential neighborhoods have been extensively damaged or completely destroyed. Critical infrastructure, including schools, universities, and libraries, has been targeted. Hospitals, the very places meant to save lives, have been repeatedly attacked and rendered non-functional. Businesses and cultural sites representing years of community life and heritage have been reduced to rubble. This systematic destruction has left Gaza largely unlivable. It creates a desperate situation for the surviving population. The human toll is staggering. As of May 2025, at least 54,000 people in Gaza are presumed dead. This figure includes an estimated 18,000 children. Hundreds of thousands more have been wounded. Many suffer from life-altering injuries. Access to medical care is almost non-existent due to the targeting of healthcare facilities. Anadolu Ajansi reported similar figures, stating that since October 2023, more than 52,600 Palestinians, mostly women and children, have been killed in Gaza. These numbers represent individual lives lost, families torn apart, and futures extinguished. The psychological trauma inflicted on survivors is immense and will last for generations. Beyond the immediate casualties from bombings, the blockade has created a severe humanitarian crisis. In March 2025, Israel resumed aerial bombardment after a brief 2-month ceasefire. It also imposed a total blockade on food and clean water. This has led to widespread starvation conditions. International aid organizations have struggled to deliver essential supplies. Their efforts are often hampered by Israeli restrictions and ongoing hostilities. The UN and international aid groups rejected an Israeli plan to distribute aid through private security contractors. This highlighted the difficulties in providing relief. The deliberate creation of such conditions is a grave concern. Furthermore, thousands of Palestinians are imprisoned in Israel. Over 9,500 Palestinians are held under harsh conditions. There are widespread reports of torture, starvation, and medical neglect within Israeli prisons. These detentions often occur without due process. The situation in Gaza is not merely a byproduct of conflict. Many observers and organizations describe it as a deliberate policy, a policy aimed at making the territory uninhabitable. The sheer scale of suffering underscores the urgency for international intervention. It highlights the need for accountability for actions that have led to this humanitarian disaster. The world cannot remain indifferent to this agony. Section 8. The Global Standstill. Why the international community hesitates. The international community's response to the escalating crisis and Israeli actions has been described as negligible. This is according to reports from Plus 972 magazine. Despite the horrific humanitarian situation and rulings from international courts, decisive action from powerful states remains elusive. There are several key reasons for this global hesitation. Geopolitical interests often trump human rights concerns. Powerful nations, particularly the United States, have long-standing strategic alliances with Israel. These alliances include significant military and economic support. This creates a reluctance to apply meaningful pressure or impose sanctions. The United States, in particular, has played a crucial role in shielding Israel from international censure. It has historically used its veto power in the UN Security Council. This has blocked resolutions critical of Israeli policies. Even with the ICC issuing arrest warrants for Israeli officials, the US response has been unsupportive. President Trump, during his administration, which returned in January 2025, threatened retaliation. He threatened action against courts and countries that enforce these warrants. He even imposed sanctions on ICC staff. This strong backing from a superpower emboldens the Israeli government. It signals that it can act with a degree of impunity. Economic interests also play a part in the muted global response. Israel is a significant player in various high-tech industries. It has trade relationships with many countries around the world. Some nations may be hesitant to jeopardize these economic ties. They may fear repercussions if they take a strong stance against Israeli actions. The arms trade is another factor. Several countries are major suppliers of weapons to Israel or purchasers of Israeli military technology. These relationships create dependencies. They make it politically and economically costly to adopt a critical position. These calculations often overshadow humanitarian imperatives. Furthermore, the narrative of the war on terror has been effectively used. It has been used to frame actions against Palestinians, particularly in Gaza. This framing resonates with some Western governments. It allows them to view Israeli actions through a security lens rather than one of human rights or international law. The lack of unified political will among other international actors like the European Union also contributes to the standstill. Internal divisions within these blocs prevent them from taking strong, cohesive action. While some individual countries like Colombia and South Africa have taken steps, a collective global response remains absent. This inaction allows the crisis to deepen. Section 9. Breaking the silence: pathways to accountability and fairer coverage. Addressing the muted international response and skewed media coverage requires a multi-pronged approach. It demands courage from journalists, commitment from civil society, and principled action from governments. One crucial step is to actively support and promote independent media outlets. These outlets, like Plus 972 magazine and others, provide critical perspectives. They challenge dominant narratives. Financial support, readership, and sharing their content widely can amplify their voices. This helps to create a more balanced information ecosystem for the global public. Media literacy programs can also empower audiences. They can help people critically assess the news they consume. Journalists and media organizations have a profound responsibility. They must consciously work to overcome existing biases and pressures. This includes making concerted efforts to report on Palestinian experiences with depth and humanity. It means giving adequate space to Palestinian voices and perspectives. It also means rigorously investigating and reporting on statements and actions by Israeli officials. This should be done even when it is politically uncomfortable. Media outlets should resist self-censorship. They should challenge attempts to conflate criticism of Israeli policy with anti-Semitism. Ethical journalism demands this courage. Training on international humanitarian law for journalists could also improve reporting accuracy. International legal mechanisms must be supported and respected. The rulings of the ICJ and the actions of the ICC are vital tools for accountability. Governments worldwide should publicly endorse these institutions. They should cooperate with their investigations and implement their decisions. This includes enforcing arrest warrants if necessary. Countries should consider imposing targeted sanctions on individuals implicated in war crimes or crimes against humanity. This would send a clear signal that such actions have consequences. Diplomatic pressure consistently applied can also make a difference. States must prioritize human rights and international law over short-term political or economic gains. Finally, global civil society plays an indispensable role. Grassroots movements, human rights organizations, and academic institutions can raise awareness. They can lobby governments and advocate for policy changes. Public opinion does matter. New polls indicate broad opposition among Americans to Israel's actions in Gaza. Global public opinion polls show Israel as one of the most negatively viewed countries. Harnessing this public sentiment into concrete political action is key. Boycotts, divestment and sanctions, or BDS campaigns, though controversial, are one way citizens exert pressure. Ultimately, breaking the silence requires a collective effort. It requires a commitment to justice, truth, and the equal worth of all human lives.